Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello, yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 920. For the 24th of May 2026, Richard Saunders coming to you from the Skeptic Zone studios here in Sydney, Australia. A big shout out before we start to my wonderful teacher friends who sometimes have very interesting experiences, to say the least. But thank you for keeping me up to date what you're doing. Coming up on this week's show, what an interesting show we have. We're going to kick off because winter is approaching here in Australia, and because I've been under the weather, and you can probably just about hear I'm almost over it, for just over 2 weeks. That's why a couple of weeks ago, Maynard did the hosting duties on the Skeptic Zone. I was too ill. Kate Thomas, with Woo of the Week in her Woo Watch segment, that's a lot of woo, is going to be looking at common myths and misconceptions and the science behind preventing colds and flus. Should you eat an orange? What about chicken soup? Find out what Kate recommends, and yes, this is very pertinent information for people in Australia at the moment. Following that, part one of a fascinating story dating back to 1984, where Bob Steiner from the Bay Area Skeptics flew to Australia to pretend to be a psychic. He went on national TV, national radio, newspapers, fooled thousands of people, and then all was revealed. Steve Terbot, the famous fake psychic, played by Bob Steiner. It's a fascinating story from the pages of the Skeptic magazine here in Australia, and you will see the lengths, the great deal of trouble, the time and the effort it takes to pull off such a hoax. After that, we have the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, read by Adrienne Hill in Skookum Studios in Cowtown in Canada, written by our editor D. Then to round off the Skeptic Zone this week, we're going to be looking in the TROVE Archives for the terms belief and paranormal, or paranormal and belief. What do people believe when it comes to the paranormal? Now a shout out to listener Helen all the way over there in Guatemala. Thank you for writing in, Helen, and with a story about ESP. I found it very interesting, and thank you very much for letting me know. Oh, well, since winter is on its way and I'm getting over this whatever it is, cold, flu, combination thereof, sore throat, whatever, it's time for me to run downstairs and run back up the stairs with a cup of hot chocolate. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. With all the weird, wacky woo that's worth watching, it's Woo Watch with Kate Thomas.
Hello, skeptics. Welcome to Woo of the Week with me, Kate Thomas. Well, it's officially cold and flu season here in Australia. The temperature drops, the coughing starts. Every second person at the supermarket sounds like they're auditioning for a tuberculosis documentary. And suddenly, everyone is looking for ways to boost their immunity. And honestly, I get it. Being sick is miserable. Nobody wakes up in the morning hoping for a blocked nose, a sore throat, body aches, and a cough that makes them sound like they're a chain-smoking walrus. So naturally, people start looking for solutions. Vitamin C, zinc, Armour Force, cold and flu tablets, chicken soup, Vicks, whatever the internet is recommending this week. But before we rank the remedies, we need to talk about the phrase boost your immune system. Because scientifically, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Your immune system isn't a Wi-Fi signal. It's not sitting there at 3 bars waiting for a supplement to bump it up to 5. In fact, if your immune system became permanently boosted, that wouldn't necessarily be a good thing, and we would call that an autoimmune disease. That's where the immune system becomes overactive and starts attacking the body's own tissues. What we actually want isn't a boosted immune system, we want a well-functioning immune system. One that recognises genuine threats, responds appropriately, and then settles down again when the job is done. That's a very different concept from the one sold by wellness marketers. So let's rank some common cold and flu remedies from least useful to most useful. Immune booster supplements, 0 out of 10. Let's start with the products making the biggest promises. The supplements claiming to boost immunity, strengthen immunity, optimize immunity, supercharge immunity, turbocharge immunity, or whatever adjective the marketing department thought sounded impressive. Many contain combinations of herbs, vitamins, and minerals. One of Australia's most popular examples is Armour Force. Now, Armour Force contains andrographis, and that's worth mentioning because the Therapeutic Goods Administration has issued warnings about andrographis following reports of serious allergic reactions, including anaphylaxis. As I keep saying, natural doesn't automatically mean safe. Arsenic is natural, cancer is natural, poison ivy is natural. The evidence that these products prevent colds or dramatically shorten illnesses is weak and inconsistent. Lots of marketing, not much magic. Vitamin C, 2 out of 10. Vitamin C is probably the grandfather of all immune supplements. For decades, we've been told that taking vitamin C will stop us getting sick. Unfortunately, the evidence isn't particularly exciting. For most people, taking vitamin C after symptoms start does very little. Regular supplementation might slightly reduce the duration of a cold in some groups of people, but we're talking about modest effects. Not, I never get sick, more like, I felt miserable for 6.5 days instead of 7. Years ago, I met a woman who told me that whenever she got sick, she would keep taking vitamin C tablets until she developed diarrhea. That was her signal to stop. According to her, the diarrhea meant that her body was saturated with vitamin C and she'd reached the perfect therapeutic dose. Now, this woman was a wackadoodle on a number of levels, but I remember thinking that was one of the more creative interpretations of pharmacology I'd ever heard. Because that's not how vitamin C works. What she'd actually discovered was the maximum amount of vitamin C her gastrointestinal tract could tolerate before it started ejecting the excess at speed. That's not a sign you've cured a cold. That's a sign you've found the laxative dose. And that's a reoccurring theme in wellness culture. If a little is good, more must be better. But biology doesn't work like that. Sometimes more is just more. And occasionally, more means spending the afternoon regretting your life choices. Zinc lozenges, 3 out of 10. Zinc does slightly better. Some studies suggest lozenges started very early in a cold may reduce symptom duration by a modest amount. But the details matter, the formulation matters, and the dose matters, and the timing matters. And the overall benefit isn't enormous. Plus, many people discover an unfortunate side effect. Everything tastes like you've been licking a rusty garden shed. Chicken soup. 4 out of 10. Now we're moving into comfort territory. Chicken soup probably isn't curing your infection, but warm fluids can soothe a sore throat. Steam may help congestion. The hydration is useful. And if somebody loves you enough to make soup when you're sick, that's probably therapeutic in its own right. Scientific miracle? No. Comforting? Absolutely. Vicks Vapor Rub. 5 out of 10. Vicks is fascinating. It doesn't actually unblock your nose. The menthol creates the sensation that airflow has improved. Your brain thinks you're breathing better. But honestly, if you sleep better and feel better, that's still a worthwhile outcome. Symptom relief is symptom relief. Pseudoephedrine. Now we're getting into things that genuinely do something. 6 out of 10. Pseudoephedrine doesn't kill the virus, it doesn't shorten the infection, it doesn't boost immunity, but it can reduce nasal congestion very effectively. So if your nose is blocked solid and you're breathing through your mouth like a distressed Labrador, pseudoephedrine can be fantastic. It's symptom relief, not treatment, and that's an important distinction. A lot of people think they're knocking the cold on the head. They're not. They're simply feeling better while their immune system does the actual work. Sleep, rest, and lowering your expectations. 8 out of 10. This is where people usually lose interest because no one wants boring advice. People want the secret supplement, the ancient herb, the hidden hack, the one weird trick doctors won't tell you about. But getting enough sleep, staying hydrated, eating reasonably well, and resting when you're sick probably has more evidence behind it than most of the supplements being sold online. And here's one piece of advice I think deserves more attention. Lower your expectations. If you've got a respiratory virus, you may simply feel awful for a few days. That doesn't mean your immune system is broken. It doesn't mean you need a supplement. It means you have a virus. Sometimes the most evidence-based treatment is accepting that you'll be operating at about 40% capacity until your body sorts things out. Not giving it to everybody else. 9 out of 10. Here's an underrated intervention. Stay home if you're sick. Don't go to work. Don't send your sick children to school. Don't wander around the supermarket coughing all over the avocados. Wash your hands. Wear a mask if you need to be around vulnerable people or any people. Protect the people around you. One of the best infection control strategies isn't something you buy. It's simply not sharing your virus with everyone else. And vaccination, 10 out of 10. Finally, the winner. Vaccination, particularly influenza vaccination. Now, the flu vaccine doesn't prevent every respiratory illness. It doesn't stop common colds. It doesn't stop every sore throat. It doesn't stop every cough. But it significantly reduces your risk of influenza and its complications. And influenza is not just a bad cold. Every year it hospitalizes people. Every year it kills people. The vaccine isn't perfect. No vaccine is. But it's one of the few interventions that genuinely trains the immune system before exposure. That's actual immunology rather than marketing. And finally, it's worth remembering that influenza isn't the only virus circulating. There's COVID, RSV, rhinovirus, adenovirus, parainfluenza, metapneumoviruses, seasonal coronaviruses, and hundreds of other respiratory viruses. So if you've had your flu vaccine and still got sick, that doesn't mean the vaccine failed. It may simply mean you caught something else. The world is absolutely overflowing with viruses. Unfortunately, there isn't a vaccine for all of them. So this winter, if somebody tries to sell you an immune booster, remain skeptical. Your immune system isn't a Wi-Fi signal. You can't crank it from 3 bars to 5. Focus on the things that matter. Getting your flu shot, sleep well, eat well, stay hydrated, rest when you're sick, wash your hands, and try not to infect everybody around you. It's not glamorous advice. It's not particularly marketable. But unlike most immune boosters, it actually works. I'm Kate Thomas, pharmacist of 25 years. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Prescribe or Pass. Listen to my podcast, On the Moans, available on Apple and Spotify and YouTube. And if you'd like help making sense of medications, supplements, side effects, or health claims, you can book a one-on-one consultation with me at my clinic. Go to www.medicationclarity.com.au. Bye.
In 1984, what was I doing? I was in my last year of high school, a time I would rather forget, and I'm glad it's well over 40 years ago. Anyway, to help me get over the stress of that final year of high school, I could always go home and watch TV. And one of the popular nighttime programs at the time was Tonight with Bert Newton, a chat show. And one day when I was watching that, one evening, appeared one Steve Terbot, who claimed to be a psychic. And over the next days, he made other appearances and began to argue with various commentators and skeptics who appeared on the show as well. This was all very interesting. He got some media attention in the press, and then, when I watched one night, he revealed himself as a fraud, as a hoax, as a skeptic after all. This was Bob Steiner from the Bay Area Skeptics, and he went under the name of Steve Terbot. And this was a hoax set up by the Australian skeptics. And I would love to say to you that we have copies of those TV shows with Steve Terbot and the various people who came on to criticize him. Some were in on the hoax, some were not in on the hoax. Sadly, I don't have those. It's probably worth trying to get those. I wonder how we can go about that. And I think that was on Network 9. Yes, Tonight with Bert Newton. And in fact, there are a few videos on YouTube. Various guests from that show, but not very many at all. So maybe we can, maybe somebody out there might know a way we can get to those archives. Anyway, so what I'd like to do is to read the report of that whole adventure, part 1 this week, part 2 next week. And this comes from the pages of the Skeptic magazine. In this case, it's volume 4, number 2, from June 1984. And the front cover here says, Steve Terbot, our psychic. And psychic is in quotation marks. Picture, Bob Steiner, Terbot. Would all those who want a private reading please raise their hands? About a third of the audience, over 100 people, at the Corellica Theatre in Ringwood, Victoria, raised their hands for a private reading with Steve Terbot, the psychic from San Francisco. It was the climax of Terbot's brief career as a psychic. In the past week, he had appeared twice on national television, on a top-rating radio show, at universities, at public venues, and had been widely accepted by hundreds of thousands of Australians as a psychic. He had endured a savage and libelous attack by Philip Adams and done things not normally done by visiting psychics. He had allowed skeptics to be present, vigorously attacking him while he performed on radio and television, and had finished all his public appearances with vigorous question and answer sessions. Now in front of him were at least 100 people who were willing to pay for private readings. At a minimum of $25 each reading, he could collect at least $2,500 in a few days. That seems cheap in today's thinking, because at the Mind Body Wallet fairs you can often see $30 for 30 minutes or $60 for 30 minutes. I'm not sure, but let's have a look. $25 in 1984. What was $25 in 1984 worth today? And according to my little bit of research here, that's equivalent to about $80 today, so that's not too bad. So I guess that's sort of more or less in line with what you see today. We read on. Except Terbot was really Robert Steiner, chair of the San Francisco Bay Area Skeptics, consultant to the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, SciCoP, member of the California Council Against Health Fraud, writer and author. He had been brought to Australia by us for, quote, Project Hook, end quote. The idea of bringing Bob to Australia had its origins in April 1983, when Mark Plummer, our national chairperson, visited Bob in San Francisco. Bob showed Mark videos of himself on television and related how he had staged one-night shows in which he posed as a psychic for the performance before revealing himself as a magician at the end of the show. In October, our co-patron Dick Smith went to the SciCoP conference in America, saw Bob in action, and was suitably impressed. Upon returning, Dick agreed to Mark's suggestion to pay Bob's airfare to Australia, but warned Mark that the whole venture could only be successful with the utmost secrecy. Mark then asked our National Committee to approve a secret project and to establish a 3-person subcommittee of himself, James Gerard, our National Secretary, and Mike Wilton, one of our magic consultants. And that reminds me, in the early days of the Australian Skeptics, there used to be quite a few magic consultants around. It was hoped that the project could be initially organised by just 4 people, the subcommittee and Barry Williams, the New South Wales branch chairperson, with others being brought in only when essential for the project. As the potential for leaks increased, with new people being involved, the subcommittee decided not to tell other skeptics unless they could be actively used in the project. Those recruited were told the barest minimum at the last possible moment. Right up to the moment of the expose, only about 6 people in Australia knew Turbo's real name. To detect possible leaks, those told were also given a couple of items of false information, disinformation. The first task was to create a psychic, and the name Turbo, T-E-R-B-O-T, was selected. This is almost an anagram of Robert and is also the name of a French fish. It was thus a fishy project, with the main aim to show how believers could be hooked by someone posing as a psychic. Only one person deciphered the code, Ross Dimsey, a Skeptics Committee member. A close friend of Bob's, Phil Herter, provided an address and phone number for Turbo in the US. Only 3 other people in the US knew before the date of the expose: Psychop fellow James Randi, Bay Area Skeptics Secretary Earl Hortler, who guarded Bob's house and business, and Mike McCarthy, the editor of Basis, the Bay Area Skeptics Newsletter. We also needed a front man in Australia. This person would have an address and phone number to take inquiries from believers and the media. He or she had to have no traceable connection to the skeptics, nor should be a scientist or an academic who would be suspected as a possible skeptic. Ray Warren was chosen. Ray runs a automobile tuning business called Raytune, and he always answers his phone Raytune. Thus, Mr. Ray Tune became Steve Turbo's cousin and handled many phone calls and inquiries. To give Turbo pre-publicity among the believers, we decided to leaflet the Albert Best meetings in Melbourne and Sydney, as a large number of believers would be attending. These were leafleted by Jack Dunn and Kathy Goddard in Melbourne, and Mel Dixon and Don Laycock in Sydney. Although these 4 were skeptics, they have not had high profile as skeptics and were unlikely to be recognised as skeptics. Copies of the leaflet and a personal letter from Turbo were sent to major psychic groups and newspapers. These helped in getting Turbo's name and claims known prior to his arrival, so that when he arrived, he was not completely unknown. The major item of pre-arrival publicity was to be co-patron Philip Adams' column in the Australian newspaper. Philip also assisted in the financing of the project and contacted Peter Feynman and Peter Howden of Melbourne's TV channel GTV9 Special Projects Department to arrange for Turbo to appear on the Tonight with Bert Newton show. At Easter, Mark Plummer went to Sydney to discuss all the arrangements with Barry Williams and came home via Canberra to brief Richard Carlton on the project. Now, Richard Carlton would become infamous some years after this, not many years after this, in around 1988, as he was one of the men behind the famous Carlos hoax with James Randi. After returning to Melbourne, Mark finalised arrangements for Turbo to appear at Monash and Melbourne universities. At Monash, Malcolm Macmillan, lecturer in the psychology department, and Greg Savage of the Student Monash Psychological Society organised a venue and publicity. At Melbourne University, final year arts student Kathy Goddard set up a bogus Psychic Research Association and organised meeting facilities and publicity. It was planned to have dinners for Bob after the exposé so that skeptics could meet him, but the problem arose on how to give skeptics sufficient notice to organise a dinner without breaking security. The solution was to tell skeptics that Dr. George Henderson, a psychologist and member of PsyCop in England, would be speaking at skeptics' dinners. The leaflet said that skeptics would, quote, enjoy his clipped English accent and turn of phrase, end quote. On May 5th, the Australian newspaper ran Phillips, and that's Philip Adams, article attacking Terbot in strong and obviously libelous terms. That same evening, the first security problem arose. Mark was addressing a meeting of Melbourne Mensa on the Skeptics. Just prior to the start, a Michael Gamble approached Mark and stated that he was most interested in the subject and had seen a Robert Steiner performing in San Francisco a year ago. He asked Mark if he had heard of Robert Steiner. Mark's paranoia surfaced, and he wondered if Michael was really from a believer group, letting him know that they knew all about the project. The subcommittee discussed Michael at length and decided there was no alternative but to tell him of the project and ask him to keep the secret, which he did. How many other Australians had seen Robert Steiner in action or on TV in America? Mark had made a security decision, which in retrospect was probably wrong, not to tell Darren Hinch prior to Bob's arrival. And Darren Hinch was a very popular media personality of the time. He's still alive, and he was also a renowned skeptic. Mark had intended to tell Darren Hinch once the Terbot tour was underway, and then to ask Hinch to do the exposé and to consider putting Bob on his radio show after the exposé. However, Darren Hinch read Philip's column and joined in the attack on Terbot on his radio program on Monday, May 7th. Thus, Darren Hinch joined the conspiracy unwittingly. After this radio program, Darren Hinch was quickly told the whole project and agreed to attack Terbot on the Bert Newton show the following Thursday. And I do remember watching those shows over 40 years ago. And one day I hope to be able to get copies of that. On May 9, Bob arrived. His first appearance as Steve Terbot was at Monash University the next day, under the auspices of a student body, the Monash University Psychological Society. Advertising was restricted to classes of psychology students some 24 hours before the meeting and to general student population 2 to 3 hours beforehand. Bob was described as a psychic researcher and the meeting as a lecture/demonstration. About 50 to 60 people attended, and only 2 people, Greg Savage, the chairman of the meeting, and Malcolm Macmillan, knew of the hoax. Initially, there was hostility as well as skepticism. Bob's adroitness in dealing with a rather rowdy group soon had the audience on his side. Probably the most impressive of his demonstrations was the telepathic transmission of the word chosen from a dictionary as a result of a seemingly random set of computations on a small electronic calculator. But the whole of the presentation was impressive, and by the end, most of the audience seemed to be prepared to grant his psychic abilities. That night, Steve Terbot was presented to the Australian public on the Tonight with Bert Newton show. Bob was keen to convey the concept of testability to the audience, and that a great deal of psychic phenomena is in fact magician's tricks. Thus he decided to use card effects and allowed Darren Hinch to vigorously attack him on the show. We hope the next jet-setting international psychic to come to Australia will also allow Darren Hinch to appear on the show with him or her and attack him or her equally as vigorously. And that just briefly reminds me of something that happened about 15 years ago. I was invited onto a chat show here in Sydney, and I got onto the train and made my way to the studio. And just before I got there, the producer sent me a message saying that they've had to cancel, which was a bit disappointing. But later on, I found out it was because the other guest, who was a psychic, objected to a skeptic being there. So they chose the psychic. Turbo's appearance started the debate as desired. Quote, was he a psychic or was he a magician? End quote. No one asked, quote, was he a psychic or was he a skeptic pretending to be a psychic? End quote. Turbo's first major public appearance brought more phone calls to Ray Tune, especially from believers who had received leaflets at the best meetings asking how they could obtain tickets for the Ringwood performances. Believers are apparently used to purchasing expensive tickets to listen to visiting psychics, and were surprised when Ray Tune told them that admittance was free, but satisfied when he hinted at a collection at the end of the meeting. Of course, there was no collection. Turbo's appearance also brought a reaction from magicians, some of whom contacted Darren Hinch, and others who had contacted Mike Wilton, wanting to expose Turbo immediately. Skeptics also started telephoning committee members wanting to help design a test. On Friday, May 11th, the morning after the first appearances on the Bert Newton show, Turbo appeared on Darren Hinch's top-rating radio show. There he continued his argument with Darren Hinch, performed some cold readings with members of the radio audience, and argued with skeptics who telephoned the station. James Gerard was one of those skeptics, demanding Steve's address so he could contact him to draw up the protocol for a test. James officially referred Steve to Mike Wilton, and a protocol was drawn up over the weekend. A lot of work went into the protocol in case believers wanted to see it. It is available to any person on request. Oh, I wonder where that is today. Dr. Charles Osborne of the Chisholm Institute rang Steve, who invited him to appear on the platform at the Ringwood meeting, but Dr. Osborne declined, stating he was keeping a low profile in paranormal research these days. It is a pity Osborne did not appear at Ringwood. He could have brought some of his 40 psychic children on stage. And I guess that's another story for another day. These seem to have disappeared since Randy's visit to the Chisholm Institute. Yes, a story for another day indeed. From the Darren Hinch show, Steve went to Melbourne University for the inaugural and last meeting of the Melbourne University Psychic Research Association, where Bob mystified some 100 students with his psychic powers, using cards, cold reading, and the cutting of the newspaper article. This last act was considered the most incredible. How could a chance cut of the newspaper column be at the exact text that was found to be written in a sealed envelope on the wall? After the meeting, Steve sampled Melbourne's public transport and was surprised to find members of the public recognising him from his appearance on the Bert Newton show. That was reinforced the following day when Steve went to Melbourne's wildlife fauna park, the Healesville Sanctuary. In the 3 hours there, he was continually stopped by people wishing him luck in the test. He encountered no hostile reactions and was clearly accepted as a psychic by the general public. The next day, Sunday 13, he spent with the subcommittee discussing tactics for the next week. One Sunday paper had carried an article on Steve and had not given any indication that the writer knew it was a skeptic's plot. On Monday, May 14, it was back to the Bert Newton show, and this time 2 accomplices had been arranged to be in the audience. Steve did some card and cash effects, but his most impressive act was a cold reading of a member of the audience. Her reactions were very believable. Steve assured the compere that they had not met. This was quite true. Their prior contact was by telephone. Tuesday 15 was Steve's meeting at the Karilika Theatre at Ringwood. This was an important meeting For 2.5 hours, Steve would be on display to an audience composed largely of believers and would be permitting a full question and answer session, unlike visiting psychics who either have no session or arrange for all questions to be written out and screened by the meeting chairperson. If the believers suspected anything involving the skeptics, they would have plenty of opportunity to voice their views. By now, believers were climbing on the Turbo bandwagon, and Steve asked 2 of them to be supporting speakers at the meeting. These 2, Marina Collins, astrologer, and John Fitzsimmons, spiritual teacher, were certainly hooked by Project Hook. Their appearance lent credibility to the meeting and helped create the atmosphere of a typical believers' meeting. Steve covered a wide range of psychic areas: cold readings, predictions, ESP, muscle testing, telepathy. He had one accomplice in the audience, Joan Warren, and his reading of her was remarkably accurate and achieved a level easily equal to that of other clairvoyants who have performed in Australia. His most dramatic reading, however, was not of an accomplice, but of a stranger. Steve was able to apply Rule 2 of cold reading to her very effectively. Her reactions were those of one clearly convinced of Steve's powers, and during question time she vehemently denied being paid and became a strong supporter of Steve. The question time was vigorous, with skeptics not in the hoax attacking Steve, Steve defending himself well, and believers coming in with comments that clearly showed they believed Steve was psychic. But it was the clear response to the question as to how many wanted private readings that showed the meeting was a success. The audience was also delighted when Steve Terbot announced that there would be no collection at the meeting. The audience burst into applause when he explained that he would be collecting $120,000 from the Bert Newton Show clairvoyancy test and therefore did not need to take up a collection to cover costs. The next day, tactics were reassessed. The original plan was for Steve to go to Sydney on Thursday 17th, then to Canberra for the weekend, have a meeting as Steve at the Lane Cove Town Hall on Monday 21st, then return to Melbourne for the expose on Tuesday 22nd. We had some positive feedback from Sydney. Gary Wiseman, quote, Australia's foremost psychic, end quote, one of the countless many over the decades who have called themselves Australia's best psychic, whatever, had offered to meet Steve at the airport and interview him for his column in a Sydney newspaper and to appear with him at Lane Cove. We had not been so successful in Canberra. Barbara Hicks of the Cronius Centre at Canberra had telephoned with wishes of support, but apologised that she could not organise a meeting at such short notice. It was decided to cancel the visit to Canberra as Steve. Against the possibility of a successful meeting in Sydney, hooking a couple of hundred believers, was the problem of maintaining security for another week. It seemed far too many people knew already, and an expose by others would leave us with egg on our faces. Steve Terbot had been created and accepted, we had made our point, and after consultations with the subcommittee, Channel 9 and Darren Hinch, the expose was moved forward to Thursday 17th. That night, Mark Plummer appeared with Steve Terbot, Darren Hinch, Bert Newton and Kevin Arnett. After some introductory questions from Bert Newton, Terbot revealed himself to be Robert Steiner. The hoax was revealed. And we have a little clipping here from the Sunday Observer. What does it say? Reprinted with permission from the Sunday Observer. Clash! Reserved tomorrow night for an interesting clash on the Bert Newton Show. American fast talker Steve Terbot, who claims to have psychic powers, among other things, will appear to do his thing, whatever that is. He stands to win $100,000 from Sydney adventurer Dick Smith and $10,000 apiece from radio star Darren Hinch and writer Philip Adams if he can prove he has these powers. Hinch and Terbot clashed on Newton's show Thursday night when the bearded one, that's Darren Hinch, gave the yank a good-sized spray and accused him of being a fake. Terbot responded by daring Hinch to put his money where his mouth was, and Hinch immediately offered the $100,000. Terbot had already performed what Hinch describes as a couple of card tricks before Newton's audience. No doubt he'll be keen to slip the $120,000 into his kick and glide back home. I rather fancy that the dough is safe, though, don't you? And on next week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, we'll continue the Steve Terbot story, which is about what happened next after the expose. And this whole article was written by Mark Plummer, Barry Williams, and Mel Dixon. And if you can't wait, if you want to read it for yourself, that's fine. You can go to skeptics.com.au, go to the magazine section, and download The Skeptic from 1984, and that's Volume 4, Number 2.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill here in Skookum Studios in Cowtown, Canada, and I'm going to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics Newsletter. This is newsletter number 247. Now don't forget, you can sign up to this newsletter at skeptics.com.au and get the full report, complete with all the links every other week right into your inbox. But let's see what our news editor, Dee, has for us this time. Hi all, says Dee. For our upcoming collaborative convention, Nauticon, Australian Skeptics is proud to be presenting multiple scholarships for students to attend. We encourage you to forward details to applicable students. More info on Nauticon later on. Pint of Science has kicked off all over Australia in 15 cities starting now. The 2026 National Festival features more than 70 events and 195 speakers spanning 6 science themes: atoms to galaxies, the mind, our body, society, planet Earth, and technology. We encourage you to seek out your local skeptical watering hole. Australian Skeptics are proud to be a sponsor for 2026. In the meantime, read on. Dee. Okay, Dee, I'll do just that. Nauticon plus Skepticon scholarships. Calling all secondary and tertiary students. Australian Skeptics and the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe bring you Nauticon plus Skepticon 2026 in Sydney from July 23rd through 25th. And we would love to see as many students there as possible. To that end, we are delighted to offer a range of scholarships for students who are able to attend. The scholarships available are 5 full scholarships at $350, plus 20 partial scholarships at $200 each. For more information and to apply, visit www.skeptics.com.au. Scholarships are provided by the Traynor Foundation to promote the development of critical thinking skills in young people. Nominations for the 2026 Bent Spoon are still open. Now, if you have a burning nomination for the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle, you can forward them to our nomination page. Nominations should be for events, activities, or claims that have occurred in Australia or by Australians. The list is growing. Be sure to see who is nominated over at skeptics.com.au, and the winner will be announced at Nauticon Skepticon in July. Do 300,000 Kiwis really believe Canada has an army of super raccoons? Well, it's not just the Kiwis that believe that. Us Canadians believe it too. Oh, some of the raccoon stories I could tell. 4% of Americans, roughly 12 million people, believe that lizard people secretly control the Earth. Would it really be outlandish that Kiwis believe in mutant raccoons? As the article concedes, quote, a certain amount of noise and trolling will always exist in surveys about unusual beliefs, end quote. But the idea of super pandas raiding your dumpster just tickles me. Hollow Earth myths bring fringe beliefs into the mainstream. Agartha, Hyperborea, and the Hollow Earth are all old, pagan, and ancient beliefs, which in the past became conspiracy theories. They are now becoming mainstream through borderline content created by apparent race supremacists and political agitators. They typically use AI as their medium, featuring online grifters and political commentators Joe Rogan, Charlie Kirk, and Alex Jones. And as a little aside, I used AI to figure out how to actually pronounce Agartha and Hyperborea. So if it's wrong, you can blame Copilot. AI psychosis is on the rise. We have spoken before on the dangers of over-reliance in artificial intelligence chatbots, specifically to do with research and the dissemination of information. But what if we over-rely on them for social connection in an increasingly disconnected world? Quote, unprecedented transparency, end quote, of UFO files released by the U.S. The U.S. government has released a batch of 160 previously classified files on alleged UFO sightings and alien life. While the translucency is respectable, it's still very vague and indecisive on what is contained in the documents, with many speculating that it is a distraction from a poor political forecast. And Richard covered these on the show last week. The files are not very exciting. Meanwhile, new UFO files offer no answers. Among the plethora of breathless coverage of the UFO files, at least one looks beneath the headlines. And amusingly, Hollywood critiques the Pentagon's UFO videos. Quote, Hollywood owns the UFO genre and has actual standards for this sort of thing. The government needs to step it up, end quote. But then again, Nauticon tickets are available. For this year's conference, we are partnering with the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe to bring you Nauticon Skepticon, life, the universe, and everything. And it's being held at the Sydney Masonic Centre for 3 days of skeptical excellence, from Thursday, July 23rd to Saturday, July 25th. See the link at skepticzone.tv. Items of interest. Is your house haunted? Subaudible sounds are an alleged culprit. If you've ever felt tense, irritable, or even freaked out in a supposedly haunted house, the reason might be more normal than paranormal. Infrasound, frequencies of noise that are too low for the human ear to detect, may still create an emotional response in people. But if the sound is undetectable, how could we be consciously reacting to it? All you need to do is ask Rodney Schmaltz from MacEwan University up in Edmonton, who I have gone on ghost hunts with, and infrasound is a really interesting thing. He's been studying it. Also, in good spirits. Why haunted houses are perfect places to connect with others. And that's connect to the people you go ghost hunting with, not necessarily with ghosts. 4 alien species pulled from crashed UFOs. How the once not so mighty have fallen. Hal Puthoff, SRI researcher and an early endorser of Uri Geller, has now gone all extraterrestrial. Silly Story of the Week. I know what I saw, claims Ohio Bigfoot spotter. A mysterious beast in Ohio was sighted among, quote, eerie howls and enormous man-sized footprints, end quote. Clearly, none of these could be made independently of each other, but confirmation bias is a far stronger force of nature than common sense and rational thought. Nope. Story of the week. How does one become a medium? A video blogger tries to explain how one becomes a psychic medium, sadly saying very little and only falling back on repeatedly using vague buzzwords to tell a story like, quote, themes, betrayal, and energetic, end quote, while making no mention of a psychic connection to those past. Well, that's all for today's newsletter. Now, did you notice that I said that I was reporting from Cowtown in my introduction? Cowtown is Calgary's nickname, due to the area being renowned for its cattle ranching heritage. You don't have to drive very far outside the city to see cows grazing on the prairie, and this nickname was solidified in 1912 when the Calgary Stampede was launched. And according to the site, horsyhooves.com, check it out, I just had to use this as a resource because I love that name. The Calgary Stampede is the second biggest rodeo in the world and has been dubbed, quote, the greatest outdoor show on earth, end quote. At the beginning of every July when the Stampede is held, the city essentially shuts down, hosting pancake breakfasts that pop up all around town every day, and hopefully with real Canadian maple syrup, with concerts, a midway, and business attire becoming jeans and cowboy boots. Cowboy hat is optional. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill signing off from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Cowtown, Canada.
Time once again to go back to those archives at Trove. Oh yes, at trove.nla.gov.au to look up matters, items, things of interest to skeptics. And this week we've put in a couple of words, and the words we've put in are paranormal and belief. And I can't help thinking of a question that was put to me the other day. Somebody asked, do I believe there is intelligent life in the universe? And of course the answer is, that's not the right question. We don't know. We don't know if there's intelligent life in the universe. We can suspect there is. But belief, no, I don't believe there is. I don't believe there isn't. It's not the right question. Who knows, but probably. Anyway, let's get back to the paranormal and belief, and we're going to start with the Canberra Times, dated the 11th of August, 1977. 1977. And this has to do with the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. World News, Science Group, Attack on Mystic Belief. There we go. New York, Wednesday, Australian Associated Press. A group of scientists and science writers has called for an attack on the following of astrology, UFOs, the Bermuda Triangle, and other cults of unreason, the Associated Press reports. The Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal said at a news conference yesterday, quote, belief in such things can harm or even kill people, and also break down our critical judgment. It may also break down our resistance to new and unforeseen forms of tyranny, end quote. The group defined paranormal as belief in unproven or mystic phenomena such as astrology, UFOs, powers of levitation, and the Bermuda Triangle as a mysterious graveyard of ships and aircraft. The committee objected to books, newspaper accounts, magazines, and television and radio presentations, which it said were pouring a steady torrent of paranormal assertions into the marketplace. It called for the cooperation with the scientific community to provide more responsible, balanced treatment of assertions of the paranormal. Quote, "Science is committed to the use of rigorous methods," end quote, its statement said. Quote, "This means that all claims to knowledge should be confirmed before they are accepted. It also means that where we don't have sufficient evidence, we should suspend judgment. When a society ignores all objective standards of knowledge, it opens the door to the possible development of ideological cults. A disturbing parallel is that of the irrationalism of Nazi Germany was preceded by a vast growth in the belief of the occult in the Weimar Republic." End quote. Now what do we have here from 1992 on the 1st of March from the RAAF News, Royal Australian Air Force. Wow, the things you find in Trove. And this is by way of a book review. Amazing Stories of the Paranormal. Flight into the Ages by Ken Llewellyn, published by Fellspin, 2/16 Forest Road, Warriewood, 2102. $14.95 plus $5 postage and handling. Reviewed by Colin Blair. As Royal Australian Air Force Senior Public Relations Officer, Ken Llewellyn admits in the preface, "Flight into the Ages is a labour of love. It is also a fascinating dip into the grey area of paranormal activities." Specifically, Ken has garnered from around the world a series of amazing stories from people, predominantly with a military aviation background, who have experienced unexplained happenings. Unexplained, that is, unless, of course, one accepts that there are paranormal forces out there which are frequently reshaping people's lives and beliefs. Flight into the Ages is Ken's first, but he assures us not his last, work on the paranormal, and it's a good first effort, particularly in the way he has woven together the numerous accounts of weird, wonderful, or sad, or even tragic incidents for which there is no apparent explanation. The book is at its most entertaining when Ken relates in his informal, readable style how he went in search of his previous soul. His search, if somewhat incomplete at the time of publication, will probably stir some parallel thoughts from readers who suspect there is something lurking in their personal cupboard which also needs explaining. There is also a rich collection of paranormal stories, all well-sourced and topical. If there is a common thread, one is advised to keep well clear of World War II airfields and Air Force museums. Sorry, to discover why, you must get the book. The hardline skeptics may dismiss Ken's first work, but they cannot fault the author's attention to detail and his global quest for hard facts to substantiate the descriptions he gleaned from the spirit world about his former life as a Luftwaffe bomber pilot who perished aboard a twin-engine bomber in World War II. As the Germans would say, Pech. There is also a question mark over the author's unsuccessful attempt to gain his wings as a student pilot with the RAAF in the 1960s. He raises the real question of whether his recurring and uncomfortable unease at the controls of a RAF jet trainer, which probably upset his career as a service pilot, could be linked to his previous short life in the Luftwaffe. Chances are he will probably never find the answer, but readers are left with the distinct impression he is not about to give up the search. A fascinating read for those readers with an interest in the paranormal activities in military aviation. Now, there's a bit of a niche topic. And finally, once again from the Canberra Times, dated the 30th of August, 1995. No Fat Chance in Coincidence, by Tom Wilkie. London, Tuesday. Really spooky coincidences, such as meeting a complete stranger at a party only to discover that you both went to the same school, are far more common than most people think. Scientists have discovered. Belief in the paranormal may be a result of our inability to assess how likely coincidences really are, according to psychologist Susan Blackmore. Susan Blackmore, the wonderful Susan Blackmore, of the University of the West of England in Bristol. The more outlandish the coincidence, the worse people are at estimating the mathematical correct probability, Dr. Blackmore found. In a study of 120 people carried out with Dr. Robert Matthews, she discovered that people use a simple but wrong mental rule for estimating probabilities. Among the questions the researchers asked was, how many randomly chosen people need to be in one room before there is a 50-50 chance that two of them will share the same birthday? And that's a very famous older mental game, that one. Most people think that since there are 365 days in the year, the answer has to be about half that, say 186. In fact, the correct answer is 23. Similarly, when told that there are about 5,000 secondary schools in England, most of those questioned believe that 2,500 randomly chosen people would have to be assembled before there was a better than even chance of two of them having attended the same school. The answer is 85. Their work has just been published in the scientific journal Perceptual and Motor Skills. Many coincidences, and that's in quotations, in real life are not really random at all, because simple geography or social factors will tend to bring people together with shared traits. True coincidence happen when such obvious explanations do not apply, and that tends to be when people turn to paranormal explanations. No, and again in quotes, explanation is actually needed, other than a better understanding of the fact that many things are more probable than most people think. The Independent. Well, there you go. And because I never put those two words together in a search, I found things that I hadn't discovered before. But it's the lesson well learnt from TROVE, because when you go there and you put in your search, well, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Thank you to my PayPal people and Patreon people who contribute to the show every week or every month or now and then, which means the show can keep going, and you can do that yourself if you enjoy the show, or maybe if you don't enjoy the show, at skepticzone.tv. Don't forget, head to skepticzone.tv for links to Noticon, and as I've mentioned before, if you know a secondary or tertiary student who can come to Noticon, invite them to head to skeptics.com.au and they can apply for a hefty scholarship. Save hundreds of dollars. Worth a go. Coming up on next week's show, part 2 of the Bob Steiner story, the Steve Terbot fake psychic story from 1984. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the Skeptic Zone studios here in Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello, Richard. Oh, I need my clicker. It's not as good a clicker. I need that other, the Richard clicker. Where's the Richard? Oh, there's the Richard clicker. Richard clicker.
Yes, I know the show's running over this week. It certainly is. Nevertheless, let's do a quick dice game. No pad, no paper. Oh, here it is, over here. Behind this partition. Right, here we go. This week we have a D20. I'm going to roll it 4 times. Well, 3 and then 1. 4. And we all get to guess what number's going to come up. So, I'm going to put it behind a partition. I'm going to guess for number 1, 16, then a 4, then a 5 for Susan Gobeck, and then a 10. Here we go. Roll number 1. Use your psychic power. Guess away. 12. Oh, well. Roll number 2. I guessed a 4. Here it comes. Ooh, lucky days. It's a 4. Suppose it has to happen every now and then. Roll number 3. I guessed a 5. Guess away. Use your psychic predictions. 19. And the supplementary, the last roll, what did I say? 10. Here it comes. 15. Well, given that it was a D20, I didn't do too bad. Today's winning numbers are 12, 4, 19, and 15.